Melania's breaking point arrived like a storm she never saw coming, though the signs were always there, hovering in the background of her meticulously composed world. For years, she had learned to live within the constraints of public life, maintaining an image built on elegance, control, and silence. Her expressions were always measured, her words carefully chosen, her demeanor a calculated mask that protected her from the chaos surrounding her. But when the DNA results concerning Barron emerged, that mask began to crack. The private fortress she had constructed around her son, her motherhood, and her marriage suddenly faced an assault that no amount of media training or selective silence could withstand. Behind the polished exterior, a mother's instincts collided with humiliation, confusion, and a surge of anger that had been suppressed for far too long. The revelation wasn't just personal, it was an attack on her sense of reality, a challenge to everything she believed was safe within her carefully managed world. In that moment, Melania was not the former First Lady, not the fashion icon, not the figure of quiet grace, she was simply a mother betrayed by a truth too powerful to contain. The whispers started small, carried through social media, online forums, and political rumor mills, but once the story broke into mainstream coverage, it spread like wildfire. Each headline twisted the narrative further, some focusing on the political implications, others dissecting her emotions, but none of them capturing the deep fracture that had formed within her. The DNA results became a weapon, a symbol of scandal, a piece of evidence that the world demanded she respond to. Cameras followed her every step, looking for a reaction, a breakdown, a slip that could confirm the speculation. For someone who had spent years mastering silence, this was her most vulnerable moment. Inside Trump Tower, where appearances mattered more than truth, tensions reached an unbearable level. Every conversation felt like an interrogation, every glance a judgment. Melania's anger wasn't only directed at the source of the rumor or the people spreading it, it was directed at the system that allowed her family's pain to become a spectacle. The same media that once praised her poise now tore her apart, questioning her motherhood, her marriage, and even her worth. In private, she demanded answers, but in public, she had to remain composed. That contradiction was torture for someone who valued privacy above all else. She felt trapped between the instinct to protect her son and the pressure to maintain a political image that had never truly belonged to her. As the story deepened, whispers turned into accusations, and accusations turned into narratives that no one could control. Melania's face became a canvas for interpretation. Was she angry, heartbroken, humiliated, or plotting revenge? The public speculated endlessly, but the reality was far more complex. She had lived through betrayal before, through rumors of infidelity, through the relentless scrutiny that defined life in the political spotlight, but this felt different. This was about Barron, her son, her blood, the one person she had shielded from the political circus with every ounce of her strength. The DNA results struck at the heart of that protection, and no denial or press statement could undo the damage. Those close to her described her outburst as uncharacteristic, a rare moment where her emotions broke through the polished shell. She reportedly demanded to know who was responsible for leaking the information, who had manipulated the narrative, and why she had been blindsided. Behind closed doors, her voice trembled between fury and disbelief. She questioned the motives of those around her, wondering how far loyalty extended when power and image were at stake. The Trump world had always thrived on control, yet now she found herself at the mercy of forces she couldn't manipulate. Her trust, already fragile, began to crumble under the weight of the revelation. For years, Melania had accepted the contradictions of her public life. She smiled when she wanted to frown, stood by her husband during controversies she privately disapproved of, and accepted criticism with stoic indifference. But motherhood was different. Barron was her sanctuary, the one relationship she guarded from politics, the one truth she believed was untouched by scandal. The DNA results shattered that illusion, not only exposing a possible fracture within the family but also forcing her to confront questions about loyalty, identity, and love. What had once been her escape from the political battlefield now became the center of it. Her reaction wasn't just an explosion of anger, it was the release of years of silent endurance. For too long, she had been treated as a background figure, the elegant silhouette beside a louder, more dominant personality. Now, the narrative shifted, and she became the central figure in a storm of speculation and betrayal. The world watched as the woman known for saying so little finally appeared to lose control. Some described her response as justified, a mother defending her child, others saw it as weakness, the unraveling of the facade. Yet beneath the sensationalism, what emerged was a deeply human struggle, a woman caught between power and vulnerability, image and emotion, truth and deception. Melania's explosion wasn't only emotional, it was symbolic of everything that had been building beneath the surface of her life. It reflected the tension between her personal dignity and the public's hunger for scandal. It revealed the cost of living in a world where perception often matters more than truth. She had built her life around the belief that silence could protect her, but in this moment, silence became her enemy. The longer she refused to speak, the more others spoke for her, twisting her story into a reflection of their own biases. In trying to preserve her privacy, she had become the center of an unwanted narrative, a tragic irony that no amount of elegance could erase. In the days that followed, every public appearance became a performance, every gesture a statement. The press zoomed in on her expression, analyzing her body language as if it were a confession. Inside, she wrestled with the conflict between reclaiming her truth and preserving her son's dignity. She wanted to scream, to confront, to set the record straight, but she also knew that every word could be used against her. The explosion that had once been private now played out on the world stage, leaving her with no space to grieve, no space to heal, only the endless noise of speculation. Her breaking point had not only exposed the fragility of her carefully curated image but also revealed the raw, human pain that had always existed beneath it. Jasmine Crockett's revelation came like a spark in a room filled with gas, igniting a chain of events that few could have predicted. Known for her sharp intellect and fearless voice, Crockett was not someone who tiptoed around uncomfortable truths. Her reputation in Congress was built on calling out hypocrisy, confronting injustice, and dismantling political spin with piercing precision. When whispers began circulating about the DNA controversy surrounding Barron and the explosive reaction from Melania, Crockett saw more than just a personal scandal unfolding in public view. She saw a pattern of deceit, cover-ups, and manipulation that reflected something far deeper about the political machinery that had dominated American life for years. This wasn't about gossip or family drama. To her, it was a window into how power operates behind closed doors, where truth is negotiated, and image becomes more important than reality. Her decision to speak out was not impulsive but deliberate, grounded in a belief that silence only strengthens corruption. When she took the stage, whether in interviews, hearings, or social media platforms, her tone was unwavering. She didn't sensationalize or exploit the moment for attention. Instead, she framed the controversy within the larger context of accountability. In her view, what was happening with the Trump family was not an isolated case, it was a reflection of how those in power often twist narratives to maintain control, even at the expense of truth. Her revelations didn't just focus on the family drama but on the machinery that fueled it, the network of advisors, strategists, and image managers who decide what the public is allowed to know. Crockett drew attention to the double standards in how scandals are handled depending on who is involved. She pointed out that when it comes to powerful men, narratives are softened, redirected, or dismissed, but when women are caught in the crossfire, they are dissected, judged, and shamed. This wasn't just about exposing one family, it was about exposing a system. Her voice carried both empathy and fire, recognizing the human pain behind the spectacle while condemning the political manipulation that kept it alive. The reaction was immediate and polarizing. Supporters hailed her as a truth-teller unafraid to challenge hypocrisy at the highest levels, while critics accused her of exploiting private pain for political gain. But Crockett remained undeterred. She understood that every truth-teller faces backlash, especially when the truth threatens the foundations of power. Her statements were not meant to humiliate but to illuminate. By connecting the dots between the personal and the political, she forced the public to confront uncomfortable questions about loyalty, morality, and integrity. What happens when personal betrayal intersects with political ambition? How much truth can a system built on image actually tolerate? These were the questions that lingered long after her words were spoken. Behind her fiery public persona, there was strategy. Crockett knew the weight of her platform, and she used it not just to expose but to educate. She reminded her audience that truth is not partisan, it's a moral compass that must guide both leadership and citizenship. Her approach combined factual analysis with emotional intelligence, allowing her to humanize the people involved without absolving them of responsibility. She spoke about Melania's pain not to exploit it but to highlight how women in politics are often treated as extensions of their husbands' reputations, denied their own voices until crisis forces them into the spotlight. Crockett's empathy didn't make her soft, it made her message hit harder. She understood that exposing hypocrisy required both courage and compassion. As her words spread through media outlets, clips of her speeches went viral, each moment echoing with conviction. People who had previously dismissed her as too outspoken began to see the depth behind her passion. Even those who disagreed with her politically couldn't deny her command of facts and her ability to articulate what many felt but feared to say aloud. She didn't merely talk about transparency, she embodied it. By daring to connect personal scandal with systemic corruption, she reframed the narrative entirely. The focus shifted from who was to blame within the Trump family to why the truth had been buried for so long and who benefited from that silence. Crockett's exposure wasn't just a revelation of facts, it was a revelation of patterns. She drew parallels between this situation and others throughout history where power was protected at the expense of truth. She spoke about how society has been conditioned to accept deception as political strategy, how the public's appetite for scandal often overshadows their demand for accountability. Through her lens, the Barron DNA controversy became a case study in how truth becomes collateral damage in the pursuit of dominance. Each statement she made peeled back another layer of the illusion, revealing the human cost of the relentless quest for control. Her courage inspired others to speak out as well. Journalists began re-examining stories that had been dismissed or ignored, activists used her statements as rallying cries for transparency, and even within Congress, whispers began about how deeply corruption and image management had infiltrated public service. Crockett had sparked something larger than a debate, she had reignited a conversation about honesty in politics, about what leaders owe to the people who trust them. Her exposure wasn't just about revealing one truth, it was about demanding a culture where truth can no longer be suppressed. What made her revelations so powerful was their authenticity. She didn't hide behind scripted talking points or calculated outrage. Every word carried the weight of conviction, the sense that she wasn't just performing for cameras but fighting for something real. Her exposure of hidden truths felt personal, not because she was involved, but because she understood what it meant to be silenced, underestimated, or dismissed. In Melania's turmoil, she saw a reflection of every woman who had been told to stay quiet, to protect someone else's reputation at the cost of her own dignity. In calling that out, Crockett didn't just expose hypocrisy, she gave voice to those who had none. Her actions didn't just shake the political landscape, they redefined what courage looks like in an age of manufactured narratives. By daring to speak when others remained silent, she reminded the world that truth is not a weapon but a responsibility, one that must be carried even when it burns. Her revelation was not a moment of scandal, it was a moment of reckoning, where lies collided with conscience and power was forced to look itself in the mirror. The power of truth and image has always been at the core of American politics, where perception often outweighs reality and where a carefully crafted persona can be more influential than the truth itself. In the aftermath of Melania's emotional eruption and Jasmine Crockett's fearless exposure, the public was left to confront the uncomfortable balance between what is seen and what is hidden. The collision between private reality and public image became a mirror reflecting the way society consumes power, scandal, and emotion. Every expression, every gesture, every word uttered or withheld becomes part of a narrative constructed not by the individual but by the collective hunger for spectacle. In a world driven by media cycles and viral headlines, truth becomes fragmented, filtered through biases, agendas, and emotional reactions, until it no longer resembles the reality it was meant to represent. For Melania, the power of image had been both a shield and a prison. She had built her identity around elegance and restraint, understanding that her silence spoke louder than any words. The public saw her as composed, distant, unshakable, but that very image became a constraint when reality shattered the illusion. The moment her private pain became public property, she was stripped of the control she had so fiercely guarded. The image that once protected her now trapped her in the expectations of perfection. Her reaction to the DNA results, captured and interpreted by countless voices, showed the fragility behind the facade. It revealed that beneath every carefully maintained image lies a truth waiting to erupt, one that cannot be silenced by public relations or political choreography. On the other hand, Jasmine Crockett understood the mechanics of image and how to use it as a weapon for truth. In a media landscape obsessed with optics, she turned the spotlight into a platform for authenticity. Where others performed for applause, she spoke to provoke awareness. Her exposure of the hypocrisy surrounding the Trump circle demonstrated how image manipulation is often used to distort accountability. She used truth not just as revelation but as resistance against the machinery of deception that has long defined political culture. Her authenticity became her armor, her refusal to be molded into someone palatable to those in power making her voice even more potent. In a space where most are conditioned to maintain appearances, Crockett chose transparency, even when it risked backlash, because she understood that the integrity of truth carries more power than any staged persona. The intersection of truth and image is not only about individuals but about society's complicity in maintaining illusions. People often demand honesty yet reward performance. They want authenticity but idolize perfection. The same public that criticizes deceit also fuels it through their obsession with appearances. The Melania Barron controversy, amplified by Crockett's revelations, exposed this contradiction on a grand scale. Audiences consumed every headline, dissected every photo, and drew conclusions from fragments without ever seeking full context. The truth became entertainment, and entertainment became a substitute for understanding. This dynamic showed how the struggle between truth and image is not only political but deeply cultural. It is a reflection of how people have been conditioned to value how things look over what they truly are. As the narrative unfolded, the media became both messenger and manipulator. News outlets competed for clicks and ratings, each spinning the story to fit their ideological lens. The line between reporting and storytelling blurred, and the truth became a commodity traded for engagement. For Melania, this meant losing control over her own identity. Every public appearance was dissected for meaning, every silence treated as confession. For Crockett, it meant navigating a landscape where even truth-tellers are accused of opportunism. Yet, through it all, one thing became clear: the image may dominate the moment, but truth endures in the long run. It may be buried, distorted, or dismissed, but it finds its way back to the surface when the noise fades. The collision between private truth and public image also raised deeper questions about authenticity in leadership and society's expectation of perfection. Melania's breakdown revealed that emotional truth has no place in a world that demands composure from women in power, while Crockett's defiance showed that honesty still has the power to disrupt systems built on illusion. The juxtaposition between the two women symbolized a broader struggle, the conflict between vulnerability and performance, truth and narrative. One tried to maintain control through silence, the other shattered it through speech. Together, they embodied the spectrum of what it means to live under the gaze of a society that simultaneously craves and punishes transparency. This dynamic extends far beyond individuals. It defines how institutions operate, how politics is sold, and how public opinion is shaped. The truth often becomes secondary to strategy, and image becomes a form of currency. Politicians know that perception wins votes, corporations know it sells products, and media outlets know it drives attention. The cycle feeds itself, creating a system where honesty becomes risky and image management becomes survival. Yet, every once in a while, a moment breaks through that exposes the hollowness beneath the spectacle. Crockett's insistence on exposing hypocrisy brought to light the moral cost of living in an image-driven culture. She reminded people that truth is not just information, it is a force that demands confrontation. When hidden, it festers; when revealed, it disrupts. Melania's emotional unraveling, though deeply personal, became a symbol of what happens when the weight of maintaining appearances becomes unbearable. Together, their stories illustrated the fragility of the image and the unstoppable nature of truth. No matter how tightly managed the narrative, reality finds a way to surface, often when it's least convenient for those who depend on deception. The broader lesson emerging from this clash is that truth and image are not equal forces. One is temporal, the other eternal. The image can dominate headlines, shape public perception, and create temporary power, but truth is what lingers when the lights fade. The world witnessed a moment where private pain collided with political spectacle, and in that chaos, the illusion of control was shattered. The power of truth lay not in exposure for its own sake but in its ability to reveal humanity behind the facade. In the silence after the storm, people began to see beyond the polished surfaces, realizing that even the most curated images cannot protect anyone from the weight of what is real. In the end, what this moment revealed was the paradox at the heart of modern society: people are drawn to illusion but moved by authenticity. The image can captivate, but it cannot heal. The truth can hurt, but it liberates. Through Melania's unraveling and Crockett's confrontation, the public was forced to confront not only the lies told by the powerful but the lies they accept in exchange for comfort. The spectacle may dominate the news cycle, but the truth, once seen, cannot be unseen, and that realization shifts the balance of power forever.